NBC's Vaughn Hilliard is in Atlanta ahead of the debate. Sarah Matthews is a former Trump White House deputy press secretary. Sarah, based on your time in the Trump White House, do you think his comments suggest that he's confident or worried going into tomorrow night?
I think what we've seen from Trump and his campaign shows that he actually is a little bit nervous about what's going to happen tomorrow. I mean, look, his campaign and him and his surrogates have been all out there saying that Joe Biden's going to come out and be jacked up on drugs or Mountain Dew or energy drinks. And I think that they know that Biden actually had a really strong performance, particularly in 2020 during that very first debate. There was wide consensus that Biden won. And so they're trying to set the bar a little bit higher, which is quite difficult, though, when it seems like they've set the bar so low for Biden when they've constantly attacked him for his mental acuity. And so if Biden just shows up and looks in charge and engaged, I think tomorrow night, then he is going to have a strong performance. And so I know that Trump and his team are worried about that.
So, Chuck, there was an interview with the Washington Examiner's Byron York. And here's what Trump said about not having an audience for this debate, an empty debate studio. Quote, "You have no audience to read. To me, the audience is easier because it's telling you what is going on indirectly with applause or not applause. This room is a sterile, dead room, which I guess is what they want." This is going to be interesting. We've all watched Donald Trump and how he feeds off a crowd reaction from people. Even when I've seen him, and Vaughn, and you know this, when you're in a scrum with a bunch of people around him, he feeds off that energy of the crowd. I'm wondering what you make of his comments and what you're expecting from that tomorrow night.
Well, look, I sort of feel like he gave away his version of populism, which is he waits to see what gets applause and then he doubles down and says it. It's almost like he needs an instant poll. In a weird way, that's what he's admitting. I need a poll to find out whether that's a good line or a bad line, or whether that's working or not working. So I think it says more about sort of how he views policy debates on that front. Look, this to me though is the real risk for Team Biden. You know, they so want to have a different experience than the last debate they had with him, or the first debate from the last cycle. And ironically, it's the single best debate Biden had, right? Because Trump's behavior really sort of almost cemented Biden's lead by that point. And it may have done Trump in at that point. And now here's the Biden campaign trying to come up with a set of rules to make sure Trump seems more presentable. I have to say, it's a real, when you sort of look at their motivation here, and given the experience they had 4 years ago, it's a head scratcher to me that they went so out of their way to try to create an environment that will make Trump seem more presidential.
Yeah. All right, Vaughn, there's another wild card out there, which is NBC News reports that Trump's VP announcement could come this week. What do we know about the thinking around the timing? I mean, is there any chance it happens before the debate?
Right. He's consistently, for weeks now, suggested that he would make this announcement closer to the convention, which starts on July 15th, less than 3 weeks from now in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. But multiple sources are telling NBC News that that decision could come really essentially at any moment, potentially today, tomorrow, who knows, at the debate. It's an open-ended question here. But for Donald Trump, you know, part of the suspense is all part of this here. Of course, Mike Pence is not going to be his vice president for what would be term number 2. And so there's still a list. He referred to it as the bench, in which he said that there were still plenty of good options in that conversation he had last night with his longtime advisor, Corey Lewandowski. And so the decision here, you're looking at North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, Florida Senator Marco Rubio, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, is really kind of that top tier. But there's no reason, you know, we're told that folks should be, you know, dismissing others, including likes of former Secretary Ben Carson, who is actually here in Atlanta right now. He's with Byron Donalds, a congressman out of Florida, at a Black Americans business roundtable just down the road from where we're standing. And Donald Trump actually called the cell phone of Byron Donalds and talked to the crowd that was there for a couple minutes over speakerphone. So, you know, for Donald Trump, I don't think it's ever worth closing the door on anybody yet. It's been clear in in terms of Burgum and Vance are the ones who have been going and making the TV rounds on Fox and other right-wing outlets. And when you're looking at what Donald Trump is looking for, he's looking for somebody that is going to be loyal and then fiercely defensive of him. And so I think that this is really, over the next 3 weeks, potentially you're going to see this really come into stark contrast.
We have seen what happens when people turn against him. And Sarah, we have reported here at NBC that Joe Biden has been studying up on issues that will trigger Trump. And I wonder what you think most likely will do that. Will he be disciplined, or are there things that could end up going viral in the negative for Donald Trump? And is it the 2020 election? Is it abortion? What do you think in terms of trying to get under his skin?
I think probably the top two things, if I'm the Biden campaign, that I would be advising President Biden on to target Trump would be saying, going after him for the 2020 election and if he accepts the results of it, because obviously Trump has a hard time doing that. I think his ego, he can't accept it. The smarter move would be for Trump to pivot away from it as quickly, but I could see him taking the bait on that front. And then I think also going after him for being a convicted felon. I could also see Trump taking the bait on that one as well, and maybe lobbying against Joe Biden that his own son was convicted recently. And I think that plays into Biden's favor, because it goes to show that there is an equal system of justice. And also, I think during the debates in 2020, Trump attacked Biden for Hunter being an addict. And that honestly led to Biden bringing out his father's side. And I think that it was a moment with the American people where they saw how good of a dad he is. And it actually curried more favor for him with sympathy for a lot of families out there can relate to that struggle. And so if they decide to go down that route and Trump decides to kind of go after Hunter Biden in a counter attack, I could see that actually backfiring on him.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.